Good morning to all you Broncos fans out there. Thank you for joining me this early morning on Legends of Mile High. I'm Thomas Hall, your host, and we will be talking about whether or not Russell Wilson really is part of the future of this team, especially after what we saw at the trade deadline. No moves, either getting rid of people or going out to get some people, players that will help this team down the stretch. So let's talk about it because I have my own opinion for sure, and there's others that they just are ready to get rid of Russell Wilson at all costs. It doesn't matter, just get rid of him. But what's the reality of the situation, right? What is the reality of the situation based on everything we've seen so far, based on his contract, and based on what the history was of Sean Payton and Drew Brees when they first got together? So there's a few things to really chat about, and I've done a little bit of research on Drew Brees. I've done a little bit of research on Russell Wilson and what he did in Seattle. So we can jump in and chat about it. Also, if we have time, and I'm hoping we do, I'm going to give a small, short talk about Tom Nalen and why he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Why, and you can take that and you can use it as your own if you want. I don't care. We need to generate some more buzz for Tom Nalen because the semifinalist vote for those Pro Football Hall of Famers is coming up. It was about 2 weeks from now, last month, I think, or maybe 3. So they're going to be announcing that soon. So we need to get some eyes looking at Tom Nalen's career. So let me jump in here and make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat from Facebook. I got my computer open here so we can make sure I'm not missing anybody's comments. And then we'll jump right into it. But first, before we really dig into everything, I'm going to say hello to a few folks in the chat. David Yunkin was in early, so thank you so much for being in here early, David. You're a great supporter of this show and other shows that are out there. David saying, morning. I would say yes, speaking of Russell Wilson, because of his contract. We could draft a quarterback to sit behind him and learn for 1 year. That is if they drafted a quarterback. And that's a good point. The way they're trending right now, I mean, 3 weeks ago, if you'd have asked me where this team would be selecting in the draft, it would have been easily top 5, maybe top 3. But since then, things have kind of changed. All right. They're no longer the worst team in the league. If they ever were. I mean, I think the Bears might have been a little worse, but since they beat them, but they're not the worst team in the league. They really went out and dominated the Chiefs. I mean, I know the score doesn't look like it, 24-9. They dominated the Chiefs, and I'll keep saying that. That Chiefs team's a good team. They held them to less points than they've scored in almost 2 years. Actually, it was 2 years, 2001, week 7, and they scored more points against them than they've allowed all season. And that's a dominating performance, in my opinion. And they beat them by more points than they've allowed to be beaten by, going all the way back to week 7 of 2021. So it was a pretty dominating win. So, from my opinion, that means that they're making progress. But there's more to be seen, and that's the problem. With the trade deadline, did they get an overabundance of confidence, right? So when they're now probably going to win more than we anticipated before, where will they be drafted, right? They're probably going to be drafting outside the top 10, maybe. And they're in the team's mind, they think they're going to push for the playoffs, but I still got to see more. But they're going to have to draft either kind of a later round quarterback to develop, maybe a second, third rounder, or, maybe one they'll take a chance on the first round. I'm not sure, but it really all depends on how they feel about Russell Wilson. So do they really want to go out and get a quarterback now that they're not going to get that franchise guy right from the start? And then if they're going to have Russell Wilson in their future. So that's a great question, David. I think they will draft a quarterback either way, but I don't know if it's going to be a first round quarterback this year. And I guess it all depends on the rest of the year. We'll talk about what's going to happen the rest of the year from my perspective with Russell Wilson. And Dominic Martin coming in saying, hey, Broncos family, just checking in, currently at work, so I'll watch later. Rest up, Broncos. Big Monday night coming up. Mile High Huddle for life, and of course, Denver Broncos for life. Thanks, Dominique, for stopping by, and I hope your work goes well today. It's Friday, so happy Friday, and there's nothing a better feeling to know that the weekend is coming up. We got Broncos Kid coming in from YouTube. Thanks for the comment, Bronco. It says, there's no better option than Russ right now. QB play around the league has been down this year. Russ is the QB until further notice. I love it. I love it, Bronco Kid. It's true. Russell Wilson is not going to get benched this year unless he comes out the next 3 games and is just awful, because Stidham is not the option. And I know people are out there saying that he needs to be benched for Stidham. I watched Stidham in camp, and yes, he played okay in the preseason against a lot of players who are no longer in the league, but he was awful in training camp, awful. And if he is the starter, then they're hoping for the first pick is what was happening. So unless Russell Wilson gets hurt, knock on wood, I don't see Stidham coming in this year. And I don't even know if Stidham is even in their future next year. That's my big thing. Is Stidham even good enough to be their backup, and are they going to stick with him? Because they can release him, or I doubt anybody will trade for him, but they can release him and gain a lot of money on the cap. They gave him a big amount of money for not really much play. So yeah, Russell Wilson's definitely the quarterback the rest of the season for sure. Thanks, Bronco Kid. Clayton Caron's coming in. Thank you, Clayton, saying, hey guys. So nice to see you, Clayton. And we've got Manuel Flores coming and said he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Russell Wilson, his last season, 2022, was an aberration. He's playing just like he was in Seattle, and I think he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory then. I think he's going to get in the Hall of Fame, Russell Wilson. And maybe you're talking about Tom Nalen. Tom Nalen definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for sure, and we're going to talk about that hopefully if I have time. So thanks for coming in. And Roy saying the same thing, Nalen in the Hall of Fame. Absolutely. There's a lot of reasons why he's not right now, and I think that is it's because people don't really watch Tom Nalen. They don't really understand the greatness of Tom Nalen, I think, because he's small market. He never talked. He didn't say anything. And I think that was a big reason. And Clayton's coming in to say, remind everybody, smash that like button and share. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Yeah, please share this show. It's a bit different show. I mean, I talk a lot about current events, but I try and just keep that history going. So let people know. And Clayton says he smells a winning streak. Let's go. Denver Broncos for life. Thanks, Clayton. Appreciate it. And Albert Knoppers is coming in. Good morning now. Albert's great to see you in here this morning. Thanks for being here, saying good morning, Thomas Broncos, Mile High Huddle fans. Thank you for being here, Albert. Appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit about Russell Wilson, okay? So they didn't do a fire sale at the trade deadline, and some of it had to do with, I think, beating Kansas City. But I also think that they weren't going to do it anyway. I looked back at all the the last 5 years. It only happened once. The most a team trade players at the draft or leading up to the deadline was 3. That happened once. Sometimes they traded 2 players, but typically it's 1 or none. So the fire sale wasn't going to happen anyway, but they didn't trade anybody. So that tells me that they have future plans. I do think some of the people that were going to be that they thought about trading are going to actually be traded before the NFL draft, because they have to do something. They're in a salary cap situation where they need to do something before the draft. I think they're still going to trade Jerry Jeudy before the draft, and I think they might even trade Garrett Bowles, depending on what they see in the draft leading up. Do they have an offensive tackle replacement in mind as a rookie for Garrett Bowles? I know Garrett Bowles is playing well, but he's also very expensive right now. He's getting up there in age. They may get someone to pick up his contract in a trade. So that's what I'm thinking. And I think they'll cut a couple players and make some room. But I think those trades, a couple trades, are going to happen before the NFL draft. But regardless of that, so they didn't do anything. That means that they think they're going to be winners. So let's talk about Russell Wilson. If they didn't think that Russell Wilson was going to be the guy, right? If they thought that Russell Wilson wasn't in their future, they probably would have torn this team down, because you don't want to be stuck with a heavy contract and a team that isn't going anywhere, right? And in their quarterback position. So that's one indication that they really think he is in their future. But the other thing is he's playing like he was playing in Seattle from my perspective. I went back and I looked at, people, for instance, people are all upset about his fumbles, right? Oh, he's fumbling at the wrong time, blah, blah, blah. Russell Wilson and taking sacks. That's their biggest complaint. He's taking a lot of sacks and he's fumbling. Well, if you go back and you look at Russell Wilson's time in Seattle, he took a ton of sacks and he fumbled a lot. In one season, he fumbled 14 times. In another season, he lost 5 fumbles. 50% at that year of his fumbles that he were lost. So it's not like you're getting anything new from Russell Wilson. He probably will fumble a few more times before the season is over, and he'll take a few more sacks. So if you were excited about Russell Wilson being traded to the Broncos when it happened, you're getting what you got from him in Seattle. So I don't know why it's now all of a sudden that you hate Russell Wilson because he fumbles and gets sacked a lot. That's what happened. He's one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league when he was in Seattle. But he also can pass for touchdowns. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. So that, maybe he fumbles a couple times, but he makes up for it in lack of interceptions. And he extends plays with his legs still, even though he's older, but he still can do it. We've seen him do it. He's actually on pace to have the 7th highest rushing total of his career at 35 years old without designed runs for him. That's a quarterback who can still get out of the pocket and make something happen with his legs. And if you look at his stats this year, obviously there's all sorts of different type of advanced analytics now, and some say he's good, some say he's bad. I'd throw QBR out right away. I just can't. There's too many flaws with that QBR system. But if you look at what he's doing, he's putting up pretty decent numbers, right? And he's executing the game plan. Versus Kansas City, the game plan was to do some short passes, hit a couple big ones, and be really efficient with the ball. And that is exactly what he did. And the Broncos ended up winning. Yes, they leaned on the run game, but there wasn't a single rusher that went over the century mark. There wasn't a receiver that went over the century mark. It was an efficient game, which is exactly what Sean Payton designed. And Russell Wilson ran exactly what they needed to run. And they ended up winning. And they won convincingly. So anybody who thinks that Russell Wilson's washed hasn't been really paying attention. That's from my perspective, obviously. I mean, other people can, have their own opinion on that, but that's what I'm looking for. We got a question in here. I'm going to just jump away from Russell Wilson for a second because Manuel's coming and asking about if the teams have reached out to Champ Bailey to be DB coach. I have no idea. I don't know if he really wants to. He hasn't seemed to want to get into coaching. It didn't, I think he's doing some broadcasting with the SEC or something like. I can't remember exactly what he's doing. But yeah, I don't think they have, but I think the DBs are getting better, right? I think they're starting to come around. I think part of the issue was injuries. Kwan Williams was really missed. Sang Bassey really was not the answer now that they got McMillan in there. I think that's helping. Mathis took a nosedive this year from his promising rookie season, but I think they're improving. So, and I think PJ Locke has helped coming back too. I mean, he's been pretty solid in the secondary. So I think it's I don't know. I don't think so. I just don't think so. But yeah, thanks for that. That's a good question. And David Youngkin's coming in talking about Russell Wilson's contract. If we released Russ, would we be in cap hell for a while after next season? It'll be a little easier to handle it. So here's the deal. Yes, if you release Russell Wilson, you're going to have a massive dead cap hit. There's no question about it. It's going to be that way for a couple of years. So if he is not in your future, you do it right away. You don't wait. you get rid of it and you take that big cap hit right up front, and then you move on to the next year, right? That's how you'd have to do it. But if they don't release him, then they're tied to him for a while, because it's painful for him to be released. Now, if he's playing like one of the top quarterbacks, which I think he's playing pretty well. I'm not going to say he's top 5, but he's a top 10 quarterback in my mind from what I'm seeing, the way he's playing, and he's only going to get better. And I'll get into that. In 3 years, his contract, his cap hit is probably going to be commensurate with where he is in the pecking order, right? Because you've still got Trevor Lawrence is going to go get a big contract. You've got, Tua's going to get is going to get a big contract probably. And you're going to look down at these cap hits and you're going to be like, wow, his salary isn't as bad as some of these other big cap hits that are coming up. So I know in 2 years, it's going to be a big cap. It's $55 million, but yeah, either way, you're going to have cap problems with his contract either way. That's just the way it is. But if he's not in your plans, you take it right up front. And Albert Knoppers is saying Russ should stay here another couple years. He's doing great. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Russell Wilson is in their future plans. That's what I think. Not just because they didn't do anything to the trade deadline, but the way he's playing, he's executing, like I said, executing Sean Payton's offense the way it's designed to be executed for the most part. I mean, he's not a perfect fit for that offense. He's not a real good quick read guy, but the game plan against the Chiefs, he executed it well. I mean, there was some issues, obviously, but he still went out and did it, and and he threw some touchdown passes that were, a couple of them were really, really nice passes, and he hit some deep balls. So I think he's doing fine in the offense. But here's the thing, Albert, and everybody else here. If you go back and look at Drew Brees, Drew Brees fit Sean Payton's offense perfectly. That's why he's going in the Hall of Fame, right? He was the perfect fit for that offense. And Sean Payton was able to use it to perfection, and that's why he was such a great quarterback. He was an okay quarterback, a decent quarterback, I think, in San Diego. But with that offense, he became great. But if you look at his first 7 games, like Russell Wilson in his first, now 8 games, there was some pretty bad games from Drew Brees in that first season to get started. It was, he threw for one game was like 170 yards. He had a rating of like 67, which was well below his average. And he had 2 other games that were pretty awful as well. So almost half of the games that he played in to start the season weren't very good or were well below his average. He had a couple really good games. And if you look at Russell Wilson statistic wise, he had some really good games this year. He's had some really poor games. The first Kansas City game was pretty awful. But he's getting time in that Payton offense, and I think we'll see as the back half of this season comes in that Russell Wilson's going to look like a much better quarterback than he did early on. Drew Brees almost won MVP in 2006, and it was all based on the second half of that season. He went out and balled out that second half of the season, and he had a couple games that were shaky, but for the most part, he was throwing for 500 yards, 400 yards. I mean, it was crazy. He had an excellent game, but I think it had to do with the fact that it took him a while to kind of fit into Sean Payton's offense. And that's what's happening with Russ in my mind. I'm not putting any money on it, but I'm betting on that's what's happening. So if his second half of his season looks much better than his first, they're not going to get rid of Russell Wilson in hopes that a rookie quarterback is going to be, that much better. They're going to have to take that contract hit anyway, so they're going to keep him around. I think he's in their future. People that don't like Russell Wilson is going to be disappointed, because I bet you that he's going to be with this team, playing for this team for at least 2 more seasons after this one. That's what I think. I think he's sticking around unless he gets hurt or something like that. He's going to be the starter for at least 2 more seasons. They may make they'll get a quarterback of the future somewhere, but I think you've got Russell Wilson for 2 more years. That's what I think. And I think he's going to prove why in the second half of that season. I'm not putting money on it, but I'm calling my shot. So we'll see what happens. We got Ashish coming in saying, what do you think about George Payton? will he be here next year? I think he's done a decent job drafting, better than Elway is the opinion, but he missed out on some free agents and gave up a little too much money for getting Wilson. Well, this is the thing with George Paton. It all depends on what happens the rest of the season. If the Broncos actually play well and start pushing, even say that they don't make the playoffs, but they make a run, I don't think they're going to get rid of anybody. They may even, they'll keep, if Vance Joseph defense continues to play well, they'll keep him. And I thought they were going to fire him mid-season. I don't know about George Paton. George Paton will be the fall guy, really, if the team stinks it up the rest of the season. They're going to heads will roll. There's just no doubt about it. And he's one. And the reason why is because of Randy Gregory and the Russell Wilson contract. Those are the two big no-nos that he did that they can point to and say, this caused us to have a losing season. But if not, I think he sticks around. I just do. I don't think they're going to move from him if they make a run towards the end of the season and they have a promising season. Because you're right, he has done some pretty good job drafting. I think he's done okay with some of his free agents. I think the big one is the Russell Wilson contract that didn't need to happen at that time. And the Randy Gregory situation was just, I didn't want him. I thought it was a huge mistake to begin with and end up being a huge mistake. So thanks for that. Appreciate it. And we got Michael Ronquillo this morning. Good to see you, Michael. Thank you so much for being here coming with some Facebook stars. Thank you for the support. Always appreciate it, Michael. Saying good morning, Thomas, on Legends of Mile High. Go Broncos. Great to see you this morning, Michael. Appreciate it. So this is where we're at then. From my perspective is we are seeing Russell Wilson execute the offense as planned for the most part. He's making mistakes just like every quarterback. And that's the thing is like people are thinking about, he needs to be Peyton Manning. He doesn't. He's never going to be Peyton Manning. And even in Peyton Manning's greatest season with Denver, 2013, the greatest offense in the history of the NFL, and MVP season for Peyton Manning, he just went nuts, throwing the ball. He had a game against New England. It was in the cold. They were running all over him. And then when it was time for him to throw the ball, he was terrible. He threw for like 170 yards or 150 yards. It was awful. So even in his greatest season with the greatest offense, he made mistakes, right? So Russell Wilson's going to make his share of mistakes. He's probably going to make more mistakes than people are okay with when they're watching from, their chair at home or in the stadium, but he's also going to do a lot of good things. And I think a lot of those good things are going to happen and they're going to make up for some of those mistakes that he's been making his whole career. Like I said, he takes a lot of sacks because he holds the ball too long. He fumbles the ball because he takes a lot of hits. That's going to happen. But you're also going to see more touchdown passes. I still believe that Russell Wilson's final stats are going to be over 4,000 yards passing for the season, probably 30 touchdowns and maybe around 8 or 9 interceptions. And that's a pretty darn good season. And it's going to come on the back half of this season. That's what I'm betting on. So they're going to keep Russell Wilson around for a couple of years. It's just, there's no other, I just don't see any other choice unless it gets so bad this rest of the season that they're just like, we're going to try and break it all apart before the draft and start over. So that's where I'm at. All right, I'm going to just jump into this chat here and see if we got any other comments we can get to here. Oh, we got Mr. Roush 05 coming in saying, I'm still shocked the Chiefs didn't score a TD. Defense really stepped up and put the offense in game-deciding positions. Absolutely. The defense played incredible. And to hold the Chiefs without a touchdown, that's pretty amazing. Because they can score at will for the most part. And they've got a really solid offense. It's still kind of an offense that maybe is going to get better as the season goes along. But I think, and I don't think the Chiefs are anywhere near as good as they were last year. I think they're 6-2, but I think there's a couple wins in there that they got that probably shouldn't have been, but they're still a good team. I'm not saying they're not a good team. So don't Chiefs fans, don't come, screaming at me. I just don't think they're as good as last year when they were incredible. But at the same time, you also have to credit the offense. They were very efficient. At one point, I couldn't believe how long they had held the ball, right? They were efficient in the running game and efficient in the passing game. They did what they needed to do to move down the field and get into scoring position. And then Russell Wilson was able to throw touchdown passes, which is what he needs to do. So that was, from my perspective, the defense, special teams too, and the offense they all kind of went hand in hand and did the right things to keep the Chiefs out of the end zone. And, they moved the ball, but opportunistic, they took the ball away and held them out of the end zone, which was incredible. So thanks for that, Mr. Roush. Appreciate it. And we got David SLC. I'm assuming Salt Lake City, but maybe it's something else. But thank you for coming in from Salt Lake City this morning, David, and asking, what do you think about the game versus the Bills? I think we have a chance to beat them. Well, I don't know yet. That's my problem is I saw an okay team against the Green Bay Packers, a better defense, obviously, and I saw a great game against the Chiefs. Now, from my perspective, I don't know what to believe. Was the Chiefs game the Denver Broncos Super Bowl, and then the rest is just going to kind of, be what we saw before, and they're just going to, lose a few games, win a couple here and there? I have to really see the Bills game, and the Bills game is kind of be my kind of marker of where this team is and what is going to happen the rest of the season. Now, if they go into Buffalo and beat the Bills, I think they run the table. I mean, I think they can run the table and get into the playoffs pretty much. I mean, not all, not win every game, but win most, maybe only lose a couple games. If they go into the Bills, go into Buffalo and they play well against the Bills, but still lose, but they put up a good fight and it was a good game and they executed their game plan that the Bills just happened to be better on that day at home, then I think they still have a chance of winning several games in, maybe or maybe not, being in the playoff race. But if they go in and they stink it up and they look like they did, against some of these other teams early in the season, then, it's one of those things where it was Chiefs game was was just their Super Bowl, and the Broncos aren't a very good team. So I don't know what to think. And I'm sorry, David, I appreciate the question, but I just don't know what to think about the Broncos right now. And I really do want to get into that Bills game, see what happens, and then go from there. But if they played like they played against the Chiefs, they can beat the Bills. There's no doubt about it. They just can, even in Buffalo. So we shall see, but I can't really get a read on them yet. So, but thanks, Dave, for coming in. Appreciate it. And Michael's coming in asking me, who is my favorite Broncos player in Broncos history? That's a good question. I've got a ton of favorites, right? I have favorites about, different decades that I've watched. In the 80s, obviously, I loved Carl Mecklenburg, and, the 90s, I was a big fan of Steve Atwater, and John Elway's obviously ranks up there pretty high. It's hard to say. John Elway's huge in my mind. I remember him playing, but Carl Mecklenburg sits way up there because I remember watching him as a kid. I loved watching Carl Mecklenburg play. He's such a great person too. I mean, I've talked to him a few times. He's such an incredible person. So it's kind of a toss up between Carl Mecklenburg and John Elway for me. But man, I have so many of the ones that I like throughout the years that it's hard to narrow it down. But I would pick one of those two, Mecklenburg and Elway. Thanks, Michael, for that question. Appreciate it. All right. We are getting close to the end of this show, so I am going to just check to make sure I didn't miss any of these Facebook stars. I think I got them all. Thanks, Michael, for all that support. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm going to jump in and I'm going to do the Tom Nalen for the Hall of Fame talk. And please, if you want to, use some of these points, I'm not going to go through a big long list of his accolades because it'll take forever. I'm just going to talk really shortly, but feel free to use them, talk about them. Let's get Tom Nalen's name out there. But so I think there's two criteria that would indicate if a player deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, right? And the first one was their career remarkable? And the greatest example of this is Joe Namath. His career stats are not incredible, even for his era. He lost more games than he won, and he didn't win multiple Super Bowls. But he's in Canton because he guaranteed victory in Super Bowl III, and then he went out and backed up his boast. And in doing so, he brought legitimacy to the American Football League. Now, that is remarkable. Now, Tom Nalen had a remarkable career. He was the first of only 2 starting centers to pave the way for 10 1,000-yard rushers and 1 2,000-yard rusher. And the other one to do it is in the Hall of Fame. But Nalen did it first, and he did it without having a Hall of Fame caliber running back behind him for most of his career. And that is remarkable. He's also the keystone in the evolution of the running game. He was the reason the zone blocking scheme works so well, making the line calls and being the only mainstay on that offensive line through the Shanahan era. The zone blocking scheme changed the game, and nearly 3 decades later, it is still widely used in the NFL. Now, that is a lasting impact on the game, and that is creating NFL history. And using the zone blocking scheme, the Broncos' offensive line is regarded as one of the best units in history and holds iconic status, known as the Orange Hush. They used it to its fullest potential, defeating the heavy favorite Green Bay Packers in Super Bowl 32. The Broncos were giving no chance to win that Super Bowl, in part because nobody believed that their small offensive line could move the heavyweight defensive line of the Green Bay Packers. Yet they did in historic fashion. That is remarkable. So Tom Nalen, like Namath, had a remarkable and historically relevant career. Now, it wasn't done with as much bravado, but anyone who knows Tom Nalen knows that that fits. Just a player going out and doing his job quietly with greatness. Second to be in the Hall of Fame, a player must have been thought of as the greatest player at his position for at least a portion of his career. Now, Nalen received recognition with 3 All-Pro awards during a time when he competed with 2 future Hall of Fame centers for those awards. Being mostly invisible across the nation, playing in a small market, his greatness was still obvious to those outside of Denver. Now, this is evidence that Nalen was considered the best at his position multiple times. Tom Nalen had a remarkable career. Tom Nalen was considered the best at his position. Tom Nalen belongs in the Hall of Fame. Thank you very much for everybody that joined this morning. Really appreciate it. Please, let's talk more about Tom Nalen leading up to this vote on the semifinals. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you on Saturday with the Orange and Blue View, and on Wednesday with the Mile High Insiders podcast. So thank you very much. Have a great day.